I had the privilege during the week of spending some time with Steve and Kate, and we spent over 3.5 hours together, and we're going to cram that into about 35 minutes right now. So can we welcome them tonight as they come and share part of their story? I hope everyone can see. But just out of what their story is I just know in sitting and talking with them, they love Jesus, they love God with all their heart, and they're trying. To them now, they're trying to lead a very normal Christian life, but they've got some challenges along the way. So we're going to explore some of those tonight and just see what comes out at the end. But Steve, we're looking at one of the first clips we've got up there. Is that I see that you were a bit of an athlete when you were a young man.
Yes, I was. I was a track and field athlete at state level, and really enjoyed my training and running. And we'll get on to what stopped that down the track.
Yeah.
Always
so
loved running.
you told me both that you both had Christian backgrounds. You both grew up in Christian homes, and you actually met. Was it in youth group?
Yeah, we both were raised Christians, and we both started attending a church in Dingley. And I was 15. Steve was a bit older. And my best friend actually was the singer in his band at that stage, so she introduced us.
There we go. So it was her fault. Okay. And then, you got to know each other, and you were married in 1989. And Steve, music's been your big thing, hasn't it?
Yeah, well, I grew up in a Christian home, also in a Baptist home, and between the age of 15 and 19 walked away from the Lord, as a lot of youth do. Didn't sort of fit in, like when you like heavy rock music and heavy metal music, and the church is not greatly into that. Actually, I must say it's a real blessing to be able to share a little bit of our story tonight, because we've been here for 18 months and most people don't know what we do. I am involved in an international ministry playing Christian extreme music to a very underground scene that none of you people may have had anything to do with. So we actually played last night, so that was interesting. But my story just goes that I walked away, and then the youth pastor at the Baptist church where my parents went said, what's Steve into? And they said he likes heavy metal music. So this youth pastor, in his wisdom, brought around an album by a band called Renovation band, who were the first ever Christian heavy rock band. And I was playing guitar and listening to music and ready to start my first band. And then when I heard that, my whole life turned 180 degrees, and I knew that was what I was going to do with my life. So 26 years ago, I started my first Christian heavy rock band. And I followed Rosanna's Raiders around. They were a band that some of you may know, Dave and Rosanna Palmer. Ended up at Harvest Christian Centre. And the singer in my band, Lightforce, in 1986 was Kate's best friend. And yes, that's how we met. And we started dating in September 1987. And I was 22 and Kate was just 16.
Okay, so you're a bass player. And you write for this band that we look at. There's a picture of you up there with the classic 80s look, with the long hair. That's 90s. That was last week. 80s was the perm.
Yeah, in the 80s, when Kate and I were first dating, I had very long hair. It was probably about that long, but what we used to do at gigs, this is back when we were dating, is we used to put our hair over in a hairspray and then crimp it, and then when we stood up, it would get somewhere. So that's 1993. We did have some DVD footage to show you, but by divine intervention, the DVD doesn't work, so you were saved from that.
Yeah. I was listening to it during the week, and I said, come on, listen to this. And it starts off with all this noise, and it goes, let's make some noise. It was great. I was happy to show it. He wasn't quite sure whether he wanted to.
No. I would have been fine. I just thought it would have been a baptism of fire for you guys. You would never have seen anything like it. It's pretty out there, the ministry that I've been involved in for a very long time.
Okay, because part of what we're going to focus on tonight's probably more later on your story, and music's probably the smaller part, although it's a big part also. Now, the name of your group, the band that you had was called...
Well, I have two bands. I have a heavy metal band called Mortification, which comes from Romans 8:13 from the King James Bible. Do we have the scripture up on the thing there? Mortify therefore the deeds of the flesh. I've actually got a 19th century theological manual which talks about, some great person was a theologian talking about the need for mortification in the believer and these sort of chapters. And so we thought it was a great name for a Christian heavy metal band reaching out to the very underground heavy metal scene. With a name like that, it fit straight in, and became very world renowned. We sold like 250,000 albums just in the 1990s. So
wow,
we're very successful.
Wow, you look at some of the pictures there. That's
2001 at a festival in Norway. I'm at that point. I'm playing as a paraplegic. I am an L4 paraplegic as a result of cancer, both leukemia and spinal cancer, but still travelling and performing and singing about the Lord wherever we go. Most of the time it's just being salt and light, If we play Christian shows we get to talk about the Lord, but like for example last night we played and it's just about being salt and light. It was interesting that for the last 21 years, no senior pastor of any church has ever come to one of my gigs because it's a bit out there. And Pastor Jim came last night. And the amazing thing was that Pastor Jim was a real shining light because he was the only person there who didn't have a black t-shirt on. So what I've done is I've brought I have a street rock band called One Rowe Vision. That was the band that played last night. So Pastor Jim needs to come up and receive his colours.
You got to see the picture on the front of this thing too. I'll hang it up the back because you have to actually see Steve's picture on here. He's actually a
well, as I said, I used to be a runner, and I can't run anymore. But I can walk by a miracle. I can walk. They said I wouldn't. So I said to the artist, I'm doing this street rock band. I want you to make me into a helicopter called Robocopter. And so that's what she did.
So I'll hang it up the back. You need to have a look at it.
That's great. That's great. Well done. So let's go back a little bit, Steve and Kate. Perhaps, Kate, in 1996, you were telling me you started to renovate your house. And there's a bit of a story there that you were paying out on Steve a little bit there. Just tell us a bit about that.
We bought our first home, our only home, that's what we're in now, in 1996. And we were actually, before we moved in, we decided we'd paint it and do it up a little bit. And anyway, we started and we were painting, and Steve wasn't really ever much into any sort of handiwork, wouldn't mow the lawns or anything like that. So we started painting and Steve started complaining about a pain in his back, and we thought, oh yeah, he's trying to get out of it again. And it kept getting worse, and he went to a chiropractor and they went, oh no, you've just done your back in moving. And then the pain would move and they say, oh, it's just referred pain, keep going. We're just going, oh, he's coming up with any excuse. He just didn't want to paint. So one night we actually left him there and I went home. We had Leighton, who was our son. He was only 9 months old. And so I had to go home and collect him. And anyway, we left Steve there, and unbeknownst to me, he was actually at the point of just vomiting all night. But he decided not to tell us because he thought that we would think he's a wuss. So he kept going. But this was just at the start when we just bought this house. We never thought that we'd own a home. I was on maternity leave, and Steve had just started his own business. So we didn't actually think that we would get a loan for a house. But and we'd prayed that if it was God's will for us to get a loan, then we would be approved by the Commonwealth Bank. And anyway, they said no, we didn't get approved. And so we thought, oh well, it's not God's will. But then my mum, who's a wise woman, said to me, Kate, you've got to fight for things sometimes. Not everything's handed to you on a platter. So we went back and we fought and we got the loan. And you'll find out later what happened. So we just moved into our home.
Yeah, that's great. And so with exploring these pains in his back, and because it was your mum that said, go and get a blood test.
Yeah, my mum is a nurse, and she said, something's wrong. She goes, go and get a blood test tomorrow. And the pain was getting worse every day. And especially the night that I stayed back and painted until I was throwing up. Kate will tell you that I'm the world's loudest vomiter. I have the world record at the Alfred Hospital as, you know, breaking the meter for the loudest vomiter. We might get into that later. But yeah, she said go and have a blood test, and I was going to see a general practitioner, and he'd never diagnosed acute lymphoblastic leukemia before. And he said, you know, have a blood test. And by the time Kate and I went back into his office that afternoon, he called us straight in, and he said, you have acute lymphoblastic leukemia, and you have a 50% chance to live. But actually it turned out that I had about a 2% chance to live. So I was extremely unwell, and that's where the story begins. I was very surprised that I was the sort of person to get a terminal illness, because I was a very fit person, you know, like we were talking about running before. I was running, you know, very hard, 3Ks on Monday, 5 Tuesday, 10 Wednesday. Like the 10Ks that my friend and I were doing on Wednesday was under 40 minutes, so that was a training run. And I was also running my own business. There was a lot of Christian bands around the world that were playing heavy music, heavy metal, heavy rock music, that had no outlet for what they were doing. They were leasing CDs and playing local shows in, you know, in Europe and America and Brazil and from everywhere. And I'd put together a mailing list through, you know, touring over in the United States and in Europe, just names and addresses at gigs. It's just a standard thing that you do to keep in contact with people. And I'd put together about 4,000 or 5,000 names. And so we put those into a computer, and I just started a business called Rowe Productions. Had no idea what doing a business was, but it was a ministry, it was a mission. It was a missions business. And so I just started buying CDs and cassettes off all these bands who were singing, you know, underground style Jesus music and outreaching to their communities and their countries. And of course we'd already started in Australia, and we'd already been touring internationally. And then I started signing bands, and this missions business just took off. I mean, like the second year that we were in, from starting with an $18,000 loan, I think in the second year of this missions business, Kate and I Kate was doing some admin. Kate was on maternity leave, and yeah, like the second year in, we turned an enormous amount of money, and it was just like God was really blessing this, and we were able to be a blessing to a lot of other people that were involved in underground ministry, which, of course, most of the church doesn't understand it, because it's something that is quite out there. But you can see from this, it's still up there. I can see it in front of us, yeah, the photo of up there of Norway. We have done some quite significant things, but when I was diagnosed with leukemia, of course, the business started dying at that point, and so we've had to learn to live on faith ever since, you know.